In this video, we are going to talk about the liberation of Egypt from the invasion of the Hyksos, by the kings of the 17th dynasty, or as they are called, Thebes as liberator princes. And they were the kings Seqenenre, Kamose and Ahmose, the repellent of the Hyksos and the founder of the 18th dynasty. But first, we think it would be better to talk briefly about the origin of the name, and the historical background of the Hyksos in Egypt. In fact, there was a historical rift over the definition of the term Hyksos. The Egyptian historian, Manetho, defined the Hyksos as shepherd kings. But the Jewish historian Josephus, through his study of the Bible, had another opinion. He assumed that Hyksos is an Egyptian term for rulers of foreign lands, Hyksos. Some modern scholarship attributed the names of the Hyksos kings to Semitic origin. The Hyksos were Asian tribes, who immigrated to Egypt in form of regular groups in the 18th century BCE, during the reign of the 12th dynasty. And they continued their immigration to Egypt for many years, before they settled in the eastern delta. And they chose this place particularly, because it was a trade center with West Asia. Over the years, the power of the Hyksos increased, and they succeeded in invading Egypt, and established their capital in Avaris, after fortifying it with 240,000 fighters. And what helped the Hyksos to do this was the weakness of the central authority in Egypt, due to the internal conflicts among the rulers of the provinces. In addition to the possession of the Hyksos, the chariots, which was a new weapon at this time. The Hyksos ruled Egypt for more than 1 century, between 1630 BCE to 1523 BCE, and their reign included the 15th and 16th dynasties. Until the wars of liberation began during the reign of the kings of Thebes, the kings Seqenenre, Kamose and Ahmose. During the reign of Seqenenre, whose name means, "who Ra made him brave," the Hyksos king Apopis sent a threatening message to him, stating that the sounds of hippos in the lake of Thebes, annoying him and disturb his sleep. Although the distance between Avaris, the capital of the Hyksos in the delta, and Thebes was 500 miles. There are 2 explanations for the purpose of this message. The first is that hunting hippos, which was a hunting sport for the Egyptians, annoyed the Hyksos king, because hippos were sacred animals, as the Hyksos god Sutek could be embodied in this animal. As for the second explanation, the phrase hippos was a reference to the ministers and advisors of Seqenenre, who incite him to the war against the Hyksos, and the king of the Hyksos knew this from his spies in Thebes. During this period in the history of ancient Egypt, revolutions broke out against the Hyksos, because of the taxes that the Hyksos imposed on the Egyptians. And this message of Apopis served as a spark for the Egyptians' war against the Hyksos. So, after the message reached Seqenenre, he gathered his generals and set off at the head of his army to confront the Hyksos, and succeeded in defeating them, but he died in the battle. His mummy revealed severe injuries to the skull and torso, which indicates his courage and valor in the war. Seqenenre's son, Kamose, completed the struggle against the Hyksos after his father's death. During the reign of Kamose, Egypt was divided into 3 regions. The first was the Delta and Middle Egypt. It was ruled by the Hyksos. The second was Upper Egypt, and it was ruled by the kings of Thebes. The third was the Nubia, and it was ruled by a black king from Kush. Kamose was not satisfied that the country was divided and that he shared the throne with foreign kings. So he met his senior men in his palace and prepared to confront the Hyksos. He fought the Hyksos, led by Pepi, who was loyal to the Hyksos, at Nephresi and succeeded in defeating and expelling them to the delta. After defeating the Hyksos, Kamose headed towards Nubia. To prevent any alliance that could occur between the king of Kush and the king of the Hyksos, he succeeded in defeating and seizing Nubia. But unfortunately, Kamose died of an unknown reason, leaving his brother Ahmose to complete the struggle. The first thing Ahmose did was not only to fight the Hyksos, using their weapon, the chariots, which was one of the most important reasons for their victory previously. But also he developed this weapon and made it faster and lighter. Then put a solid plan for repelling the Hyksos out of Egypt. Ahmose's plan was to set off with his army to the castle of Chiaru and then occupy it. In this way, he could prevent any Asian supply to the Hyksos, and thus facilitate the siege of Avaris. Actually, Ahmose set out with his army to the north. When he reached Heliopolis and conquered it, he deviated with his army towards the desert to deceive the Hyksos. He marched about 150 kilometers towards Chiaru, and managed to conquer the castle. After that, the siege of Avaris began for a long time, punctuated by attacks by the Egyptians, aimed at attrition the Hyksos, after which the Egyptians succeeded in seizing Avaris and expelling the Hyksos out of Egypt. Ahmose was not content with the expulsion of the Hyksos from Egypt, and chased them until Sharuan in Palestine. He besieged them there for 3 years, and seized it. Then Ahmose and his army continued marching northwards, until reached Phoenicia, to secure the eastern borders of Egypt. It appears that Ahmose was the first Egyptian king to realize that securing Egypt against the aggressors must begin from outside the country, by subjugating the neighboring countries to the Egyptian domination and authority. Hence the idea of the Egyptian empire arose, and military campaigns became not only for the purpose of trade, but also for subduing the rebels, and the Egyptian peasant turned into a combat soldier. During Ahmose's military campaigns in the Levant, revolutions and rebellions broke out in the southern lands that Kamose controlled previously. Therefore, in the 15th year of his rule, Ahmose headed southward to Nubia until he reached Buhan and subdued the rebels. Then he restored Buhan Castle, and it became the capital of this region. He also appointed a governor there. These things made Buhan an impregnable fortress for Egypt from the southern side. Thanks to Ahmose and the kings of the 17th dynasty, Egypt entered one of its golden ages, which known as the New Kingdom. And Egypt became a sprawling empire during the reign of the kings who followed them, like Thutmose III and Ramses II. Thank you for watching.